The sun hung low in the sky, casting an amber glow over the dusty plains of Arizona. A lone coyote howled in the distance, its mournful cry echoing through the stillness of the desert. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the land itself held its breath, waiting for something or someone to break the silence. It was here, amidst this barren expanse, that a young woman sat atop a wagon pulled by two weary horses. Her hands were clasped tightly together, her knuckles white from the force of her grip. She stared ahead, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the silhouette of a distant mountain range loomed like a shadowy promise. Her name was Clara, though few knew much about her beyond the fact that she had recently become the wife of Jonathan Whitmore, a wealthy banker from the town of Silver Creek. Their marriage had been arranged, a union born not out of love but necessity. Jonathan needed an heir to carry on his legacy, and Clara had little choice in the matter. Her father, once a prosperous rancher, had lost everything when drought swept across their lands. Desperate to save what remained of his family, he had sold his daughter's hand to the highest bidder. That bidder turned out to be Jonathan Whitmore, a man nearly 3 decades older than Clara. As the wagon rumbled along the dirt road, Clara couldn't help but feel trapped. The rattling wheels seemed to echo the turmoil within her heart. She glanced at Jonathan, who sat beside her, his face partially obscured by the brim of his wide hat. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered and stern, with piercing blue eyes that rarely softened. Even now, as they traveled toward their new home, a sprawling estate nestled deep in the countryside, he maintained an air of authority, as if nothing could possibly rattle him. But Clara knew better. Beneath his polished exterior lay secrets, buried truths that whispered to her every time he looked away or fidgeted with the reins. Little did she know, those secrets would soon come to light in ways neither of them could have imagined. The journey to the estate was long and arduous, the heat oppressive even as the sun began its descent. Dust kicked up around the wagon, coating everything in a fine layer of grit. Clara coughed softly, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders despite the warmth. Beside her, Jonathan adjusted his collar, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to show it. "We'll reach the property before nightfall," he said abruptly, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "You'll see it's quite impressive." Clara nodded faintly, unsure what to say. She had heard tales of the estate. Of course. It was said to be one of the largest in the region, complete with grand gardens, stables filled with prize horses, and a mansion that sparkled under the moonlight. Yet none of these descriptions prepared her for the reality of living there, nor did they ease the unease twisting in her stomach. Hours passed, each moment stretching into eternity. The landscape shifted gradually, the flat expanse of desert giving way to rolling hills dotted with mesquite trees. As dusk settled over the land, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Clara spotted something in the distance, a cluster of buildings surrounded by fences and pastures. Her heart sank as recognition dawned. This was it, the place she would call home for the rest of her life. But then, just as the wagon entered the final stretch of road leading to the estate, disaster struck. A deafening roar split the air, followed by the thundering hooves of dozens of wild Mustangs. From somewhere beyond the tree-line emerged a herd, so vast it seemed to swallow the horizon. They charged forward with breathtaking speed, their manes flying like banners in the wind. Clara gasped, clutching the side of the wagon as panic surged through her veins. "What is this?" Jonathan barked, his voice tinged with alarm. He yanked hard on the reins, trying desperately to steer the horses off the path. But it was too late. The Mustangs were upon them, their powerful bodies bounding mere feet away from the wagon. One particularly large stallion reared up, its front hooves striking dangerously close to Jonathan's head. "Get down!" he shouted, grabbing Clara's arm and pulling her lower. She obeyed instinctively, pressing herself against the floorboards as chaos erupted all around them. The wagon swayed violently, threatening to overturn at any moment. Somewhere in the confusion, Clara caught sight of a young boy riding bareback on one of the Mustangs. He wore no shirt, only tattered trousers, and his dark hair whipped wildly in the breeze. His expression was fierce, almost feral, as he guided his horse directly toward the wagon. Before Clara could process what was happening, the boy leapt from his steed, landing gracefully beside the wagon. In one fluid motion, he seized the reins from Jonathan's hands. "You don't belong here," he snarled, his voice raw with defiance. "Turn back." Jonathan stared at him, stunned. "Who are you? What gives you the right to interfere?" "I'm protecting my land," the boy replied, his jaw clenched. "This isn't yours. It never will be." For a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. Clara watched in awe as the boy stood his ground, unyielding despite being vastly outnumbered. Then, without warning, the herd surged again, forcing the wagon to halt completely. The boy disappeared into the chaos, leaving behind only the sound of retreating hooves. When the dust finally settled, Clara and Jonathan found themselves stranded in the middle of nowhere. The horses were spooked, refusing to move, and the road ahead lay blocked by fallen branches and debris trampled by the stampede. For hours, they debated their next move, arguing fiercely until exhaustion silenced them both. It was during this lull that Clara noticed something peculiar, a small wooden box wedged beneath the seat of the wagon. Curiosity piqued. She retrieved it, brushing off the dirt to reveal intricate carvings etched into its surface. Opening it revealed a collection of old letters, yellowed with age. Each bore the same handwriting, elegant yet hurried, as though written in haste. Intrigued, Clara began reading aloud, her voice trembling. The letters spoke of betrayal, of stolen land, and of a hidden treasure buried somewhere near the estate. As she delved deeper into their contents, a chilling realization dawned upon her. Jonathan Whitmore wasn't merely a banker. He was a thief, using his wealth and influence to claim properties that didn't rightfully belong to him. And the boy on the Mustang? He was a rightful heir. Night fell quickly, cloaking the world in darkness save for the faint glow of stars scattered across the heavens. Clara sat alone under the canopy of the wagon, the letters clutched tightly in her hands. Tears streamed down her cheeks, mingling with the dust on her skin. How could she have been so blind? So naive? Jonathan approached cautiously, sensing her distress. "Clara," he began, his tone softer than usual, "there's more to this than you understand." "There's always more, isn't there?" she snapped, turning to face him. "Why didn't you tell me the truth?" He sighed heavily, running a hand through his graying hair. "Because the truth is messy, Clara. Complicated. I wanted to give you a good life, to provide for you, but yes, some of the means, they weren't entirely honest." "And the boy," she pressed, her voice shaking. "What about him?" Jonathan hesitated before answering. "His name is Elias. His family owned this land until my predecessor swindled it from them. I inherited the debt, along with the responsibility to rectify it. But I couldn't, not without losing everything." Clara closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the weight of his confession. Part of her wanted to hate him, to cast him aside and align herself with Elias. Yet another part recognized the complexity of human nature, the gray areas that blurred lines between right and wrong. By morning, a decision had been made. Together, Clara and Jonathan sought out Elias, offering restitution in the form of land and money. Though skeptical at first, Elias eventually accepted, moved by Clara's sincerity and Jonathan's willingness to make amends. In doing so, they forged an unlikely alliance, one built on trust rather than deceit. Yet the story didn't end there. Hidden within the estate grounds lay the treasure mentioned in the letters, a chest filled with gold coins and jewels, remnants of a forgotten era. Its discovery brought prosperity to the region, allowing the once divided communities to coexist peacefully. As for Clara, she found solace in unexpected places, in the laughter of children playing among the Mustangs, in the quiet strength of Jonathan's devotion, and in the knowledge that sometimes redemption comes in the most unbelievable forms. The days that followed the discovery of the treasure were a blur of activity. The estate, once a symbol of Jonathan's ambition and greed, transformed into a hub of collaboration and renewal. Clara, who had initially felt like an outsider in this world, found herself stepping into a role she never imagined, a mediator between the old ways of the Wild West and the new opportunities that lay ahead. The mornings were crisp, the air carrying the scent of sagebrush and pine. Clara would rise early, walking the grounds as the sun stretched its golden fingers over the landscape. She often found herself near the stables, where Elias spent much of his time tending to the Mustangs. There was something about those wild horses that fascinated her, their untamed spirit, their resilience. They reminded her of the journey she had embarked upon, the transformation from a reluctant bride to a woman with purpose. Elias, for his part, was wary at first. He had grown up hearing stories of bankers and landowners who took what wasn't theirs, leaving broken families and shattered dreams in their wake. But Clara's sincerity, coupled with Jonathan's willingness to make amends, began to chip away at his walls. Slowly, hesitantly, he started to trust them. One evening, as the sky burned with hues of orange and pink, Clara approached Elias while he was grooming a particularly spirited stallion. The horse, named Thunder, was known for his fiery temperament, but under Elias's care, he seemed almost docile. Clara watched from a distance, marveling at the bond between man and beast. "You're good with them," she said softly, breaking the silence. Elias glanced up, his dark eyes meeting hers. "They understand me," he replied simply. "Or maybe it's the other way around." Clara smiled, stepping closer. "Do you think they'll ever let me get close?" He studied her for a moment before nodding toward Thunder. "Try, but be careful. He doesn't take kindly to strangers." With trepidation, Clara extended a hand, allowing Thunder to sniff her palm. The horse's nostrils flared, his ears twitching as he assessed her. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed as though he might rear up, but then, almost imperceptibly, he relaxed. Clara exhaled, relief washing over her. "He likes you," Elias said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. From that day forward, Clara made it a point to spend more time with the Mustangs. She learned their habits, their quirks, and slowly earned their trust. It was during these moments, surrounded by the raw beauty of the wild horses, that she began to feel truly alive. Jonathan, too, underwent a change. The man who had once been consumed by ambition and the pursuit of wealth now dedicated himself to rebuilding the community. With the treasure unearthed from the estate grounds, he established a fund to support local farmers and ranchers who had fallen on hard times. He also worked tirelessly to restore the lands that had been neglected or mismanaged under previous ownership. There were challenges, of course. Not everyone was willing to forgive Jonathan for his past actions, and some viewed his sudden change of heart with suspicion. But Clara stood firmly by his side, reminding him of the progress they had made and the lives they had touched. One such life belonged to Mrs. Harper, a widow whose small farm had been on the brink of collapse. With Jonathan's financial assistance and Clara's encouragement, Mrs. Harper managed to save her land and even expand her operations. On a sunny afternoon, she invited Clara and Jonathan to visit, presenting them with a basket of fresh produce as a token of gratitude. "Thank you," Mrs. Harper said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've given me hope when I thought all was lost." Clara placed a hand on the older woman's shoulder, her heart swelling with pride. "It's not just us. It's the entire community coming together. That's what makes it possible." As the weeks turned into months, the estate became a beacon of hope and unity. People from neighboring towns began to flock there, drawn by the promise of opportunity and the chance to start anew. Jonathan oversaw the construction of a schoolhouse, ensuring that children in the area would have access to education. Clara, meanwhile, organized events that brought people together, barbecues, dances, and even rodeos that celebrated the spirit of the Wild West. But beneath the surface of this newfound harmony lay a lingering question. What are the secrets buried alongside the treasure? Clara often found herself wondering if there were other truths waiting to be uncovered, other wrongs that needed to be righted. And then there was Elias, whose presence continued to stir emotions within her that she struggled to define. One night, under a canopy of stars so bright they seemed to touch the earth, Clara found herself alone on a balcony overlooking the estate grounds. The Mustangs grazed peacefully in the distance, their silhouettes outlined against the silver glow of the moon. She leaned against the railing, lost in thought, when a shadow fell across her. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Elias asked, joining her at the railing. Clara nodded, unable to tear her gaze from the scene before her. "I never imagined this place could feel so alive." Elias chuckled softly. "Funny how things turn out. When I first saw you and Jonathan riding in that wagon, I thought you were just another piece of the puzzle I hated. But now, He trailed off, glancing at her briefly before looking away. Clara felt her cheeks warm, unsure of how to respond. The tension between them was palpable, a delicate thread weaving to the fabric of their relationship. "Do you ever wonder what else is out there?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Secrets we haven't uncovered yet." Elias shrugged, his expression unreadable. "Maybe. Or maybe it's better focus on what we can see, what we can Clara considered this, her mind drifting back to the letters she had discovered in the wagon. There was still so much she didn't know about the history of the land, about the people who had come before her. Yet perhaps, as Elias suggested, the most important work lay in shaping the future rather than dwelling on the past. As they stood there in silence, the wind carried the faint sound of laughter from the festivities taking place below. Children ran to the gardens, their voices mingling with the strains of fiddle being played by a local musician. For the first time since her arrival, Clara felt a sense of belonging, not just to the estate, but to the people and the land itself. The twist came unexpectedly, as twists often do. It began with a letter delivered by a weary traveler, a man who claimed to have information about Jonathan's predecessor, the very man responsible for swindling the land from Elias's family. Intrigued, Clara opened the letter, her heart pounding as she read the contents. What she discovered shook her to her core. The predecessor hadn't acted alone. There was a partner, a name Clara recognized immediately, her own father. The revelation hit her like a thunderclap. Her father, the man she had believed to be a victim of circumstance, had conspired with the banker to steal the land. The betrayal cut deep, reopening wounds she thought had healed. How could he have done such a thing? And why had he kept it hidden for so long? Clara sought out Jonathan, needing answers, needing clarity. Together, they delved deeper into the archives, uncovering documents that painted a picture far darker than either of them had anticipated. The conspiracy extended beyond just the land. It involved countless other properties, entire families displaced in the name of profit. Faced with this unbearable truth, Clara felt her world fracture. But instead of succumbing to despair, she channeled her anger and grief into action. Alongside Jonathan and Elias, she vowed to expose the full extent of the deception, no matter the cost. Their efforts culminated in a dramatic confrontation with the remaining conspirators, a tense showdown that tested their courage and resolve. In the end, justice prevailed, not through violence, but through truth. The stolen lands were returned to their rightful owners, and the names of those wrongfully accused were cleared. As the dust settled, Clara stood atop the hill overlooking the estate, the wind whipping through her hair. Behind her, the Mustangs roamed freely, symbols of freedom and resilience. Before her stretched a horizon filled with possibilities, a future shaped by choices rather than circumstances. And in that moment, she knew she had found her place, not just in the Wild West, but in the hearts of those who called it home. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a final blaze of crimson and gold over the land. Clara stood still on the hill, her breath visible in the cooling evening air. The confrontation had left her drained but strangely invigorated, as though the weight she had carried for so long had finally been lifted. Yet, even as the dust settled and the conspirators faced justice, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that this chapter was far from over. Jonathan approached her quietly, his footsteps muffled by the dry grass beneath their feet. He stopped beside her, offering no words, just his silent presence. They both gazed out the estate, now bathed in twilight shadows, its sprawling gardens and pastures stretching toward the distant mountains. For all its grandeur, the place no longer felt like an emblem of greed or power. Instead, it stood as a testament to redemption, resilience, and the unyielding human spirit. But there were questions lingering in the air, unresolved threads waiting to be woven into the tapestry of their lives. Clara turned to Jonathan, her voice steady despite the turmoil within her. "Do you think we've done enough?" she asked softly. He glanced at her, his piercing blue eyes reflecting the fading light. "Enough? No, but we've started something, a foundation, perhaps, and foundations can always be built upon." She nodded, finding comfort in his pragmatism, yet her thoughts drifted back to Elias, whose shadow loomed large in her mind. There was a connection between them, undeniable yet undefined. It wasn't just about the Mustangs or the shared struggle against injustice. It was something deeper, something rooted in trust and mutual respect. Still, Clara hesitated to act on whatever might exist between them. She owed loyalty to Jonathan, who had shown her grace when she least expected it. As if reading her mind, Jonathan added, "Clara, I won't pretend to understand everything you feel, but I do know this. Life is too short to live with regret. If your heart tells you one thing and your head another, listen to both, but follow where your soul leads." His words struck a chord deep within her. Was he giving her permission to explore what lay beyond their marriage? Or was he simply acknowledging the complexities of love and duty? Either way, his honesty unsettled her, forcing her to confront truths she had buried beneath layers of obligation. The days that followed were filled with quiet reflection. Clara threw herself into the restoration efforts around the estate, overseeing projects that would benefit not only the immediate community, but also future generations. A new irrigation system was implemented, ensuring that crops could thrive even during droughts. Workshops were organized to teach farming techniques and craftsmanship, empowering locals to sustain themselves independently. Slowly, the estate became less a private domain and more of a communal hub, a place where people gathered not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Elias, meanwhile, remained a constant presence, though his interactions with Clara grew increasingly complex. He seemed torn between gratitude for the changes brought about by her and Jonathan, and lingering resentment toward the system that had wronged him. One afternoon, as Clara supervised construction of a new stable, Elias appeared unexpectedly, carrying a bundle of freshly cut wood. "You're working too hard," he said gruffly, setting down the logs with a thud. Clara wiped sweat from her brow, smiling faintly. "Hard work never hurt anyone." "Maybe not," he replied, leaning against the wall. "But you don't have to prove anything to us anymore. You've already done enough." Her smile faltered slightly. "I'm not doing it for you, or anyone else. I'm doing it because it feels right." Elias studied her for a moment, his dark eyes searching hers. Then, without warning, he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch was fleeting, almost imperceptible, but it sent a shiver down her spine. Before she could respond, he stepped back, clearing his throat awkwardly. "I should get back to the herd," he muttered, turning away. "Elias," she called after him, her voice tinged with urgency. He paused, glancing over his shoulder. "Thank you for trusting me, for believing in me, even when I doubted myself." He gave her a small nod before walking off, leaving her alone with her thoughts. That night, unable to sleep, Clara wandered the halls of the mansion. The house was eerily quiet, save for the occasional creak of floorboards beneath her feet. She found herself drawn to the study, where Jonathan often spent hours poring over documents and maps. To her surprise, he was still awake, seated at his desk with a candle burning low beside him. "Still up?" he asked, looking up as she entered. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, moving closer. "There's something I need to tell you." Jonathan set aside his papers, his expression serious. "What is it?" Clara took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "You've given me so much security, purpose, a chance to make amends for my family's mistakes. But I don't think I can continue pretending that our marriage is enough for me." His brow furrowed slightly, but he didn't interrupt. Encouraged by his silence, she continued, "When I married you, I thought it was the only path forward. But now, I realize there are other paths, other choices. And one of those choices involves Elias." Jonathan leaned back in his chair, absorbing her words. After a long pause, he spoke, his voice calm but tinged with sadness. "So it's come to this." "I'm sorry," Clara whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I never meant to hurt you." "You haven't," he said firmly, though his gaze betrayed the pain behind his words. "Not intentionally, at least. Love isn't something we control. Clara, if your heart belongs to someone else, then I'd rather release you than keep you bound to me out of obligation." Her breath caught in her throat. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," he replied, standing and placing a hand on her shoulder. "Go to him. Clara, find whatever happiness you seek. Just promise me one thing. What's that? That you'll always remember what we built here, together, not just the estate, but the good we've done. Let that be part of your legacy, too. Clara nodded, overwhelmed by his generosity. Thank you, she murmured, embracing him tightly. When they parted, she felt lighter, freer, as though a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. The following morning, Clara sought out Elias. She found him near the riverbank, tending to Thunder, who nuzzled against his chest affectionately. As she approached, Elias straightened, sensing her presence. I need to talk to you, she said, her voice steady. He raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. All right, what's on your mind? Taking a deep breath, Clara explained everything. The conversation with Jonathan, her decision to leave the marriage, and her feeling for Elias. By the time she finished, her cheeks were flushed, and her hands trembled slightly. Elias stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and husky. You realize what this means, don't you? People will talk. They'll judge you. I don't care, she replied firmly. I've spent years letting others dictate my life. I won't let them anymore, not even you. A ghost of a smile flickered across his lips. Feisty, aren't you? Clara laughed softly, stepping closer. Is that a yes? It's a maybe, he teased, pulling her into his arms. But only if you promise to ride with me sometime. I promise, she said, resting her head against his chest. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt truly at peace. In the months that followed, Clara and Elias forged a bond unlike any either of them had known before. Together, they worked side by side, caring for the Mustangs and helping to expand the community initiative Jonathan had begun. Though whispers lingered among the townsfolk, neither paid them much heed. Their love was real, unshakable, and rooted in a shared commitment to making the world a better place. And Jonathan? He remained a steadfast ally, supporting their endeavors and occasionally dropping by for visits. Though the pain of losing Clara never fully faded, he found solace in knowing he had played a part in setting her free. In time, he met someone else, a kind-hearted widow named Margaret who shared his passion for education and reform. Together, they embarked on new adventures, continuing the work they had started at the estate. As for Clara and Elias, their story became legend in the Wild West, a tale of love, courage, and the power of second chances. Underneath the vast Arizona sky, surrounded by the untamed beauty of the Mustangs, they built a life filled with laughter, challenge, and endless possibility. And so, the circle closed, not with an end, but with a beginning. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, each one painting a new chapter in the lives of Clara and Elias. The estate, once a symbol of greed and deceit, had transformed into a thriving hub of community and hope. Under their care, the Mustangs roamed freely across the vast pastures, their wild spirits tamed only by the love and respect they received from those who tended to them. The land itself seemed to breathe anew, as if it had been waiting for this moment, waiting for the right people to come along and heal its wounds. Clara found herself marveling at the changes that had taken place, not just in the world around her, but within herself as well. She no longer felt like a pawn in someone else's game. She was now an architect of her own destiny. Each sunrise brought fresh opportunities, each sunset a chance to reflect on the progress made. Yet, amidst all the growth and renewal, there were moments when the weight of the past pressed heavily upon her shoulders. One such moment came on a cool autumn evening, as Clara sat alone on the porch of the old barn. The air carried the faint scent of wood smoke and hay, mingling with the crispness of falling leaves. Thunder, the spirited stallion Elias had first introduced her to, grazed nearby, his mane catching the golden light of the setting sun. Clara watched him silently, her thoughts drifting back to the letters she had discovered in the wagon, the ones that had revealed a tangled web of betrayal involving her father. She hadn't spoken much about those letters since uncovering their contents, choosing instead to focus on the present and future. But tonight, the silence between her and her memories felt unbearable. Reaching into her pocket, she pulled out a folded piece of paper, a letter she had written but never sent. It was addressed to her father, though he would never read it. Writing it had been cathartic, a way to confront the anger and disappointment she still harbored toward him. Thinking about him again, Elias's voice startled her, though she quickly recovered, folding the letter and slipping it back into her pocket. "I didn't hear you approach," she said softly, making room for him on the bench beside her. He sat down, his presence grounding her in the here and now. "You don't have to hide it from me. Clara, I know how hard it must be to reconcile what you've learned about your family. It's not just that," she admitted, her gaze fixed on Thunder. "It's the idea that maybe my father wasn't entirely wrong. He did what he thought was necessary to survive, to protect us, and while I can't condone his actions, I can't ignore the reasons behind them either." Elias nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. Sometimes the lines between right and wrong blur so much that it's impossible to see clearly. That doesn't excuse what happened, but it does make it more complicated. "Yes," Clara agreed, her voice tinged with sadness. "And sometimes I wonder if forgiving him means excusing his mistakes, or if holding on to resentment is any better." They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the rustling of leaves and the distant call of a bird returning to its nest. Finally, Elias spoke, his tone gentle yet firm. "Forgiveness isn't about excusing. It's about freeing yourself from the burden of carrying someone else's mistakes. Maybe your father deserved accountability, but you don't deserve to carry his guilt forever." His words resonated deeply within her, stirring something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope. Perhaps forgiveness wasn't betrayal of justice, but a gift she could give herself. A way to move forward without being tethered to the past. The following morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of day that promised adventure. Clara rose early, eager to take advantage of the crisp air and the promise of discovery. She found Elias already in the stables, saddling up one of the gentler horses for her to ride. "You're up early," he observed, handing her the reins. "I couldn't sleep," she confessed, mounting the horse with practiced ease. "Too many ideas running through my head." "Care to share?" he asked, climbing onto his own steed. Clara hesitated, then smiled. "Let's explore beyond the usual boundaries. There's a canyon I've heard about, not far from here. Maybe we'll find something unexpected." Elias raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Unexpected? Like what?" "That's the beauty of it. You never know until you go," she replied, urging her horse forward. Side by side, they rode to the rolling hills, the landscape shifting gradually from lush pastures to rocky terrain dotted with sagebrush. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the ground. As they neared the canyon, Clara felt a thrill of anticipation building within her. This was exactly what she needed. A break from familiar, a chance to rediscover the wonder of the unknown. When they reached the edge of the canyon, Clara dismounted, her breath catching at the sight before her. The walls of the canyon stretched upward like ancient sentinels, their surfaces etched with patterns that told stories older than memory. A narrow trail wound its way downward, disappearing into the depths below. "We should follow it," Clara said impulsively, her curiosity getting the better of her. Elias chuckled, shaking his head. "You're as reckless as ever. And you wouldn't have it any other way." She shot back playfully, already beginning her descent. The trail proved treacherous in places, requiring careful footing and steady nerves. But as they ventured deeper into the canyon, the air grew cooler, carrying with it the faint scent of water. Clara's heart quickened as she realized what this meant. A hidden spring, perhaps even a waterfall. Sure enough, after rounding a bend in the path, they emerged into a small, secluded oasis. A crystal-clear pool lay nestled against the base of a towering waterfall, its waters sparkling like diamonds in the sunlight. Surrounding the pool were clusters of wildflowers, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the otherwise rugged landscape. Clara gasped, overwhelmed by the beauty of it all. "It's breathtaking," she whispered, sinking to her knees at the water's edge. Elias joined her, sitting cross-legged on the ground. "This place feels sacred, like it's been waiting for us to find it." "In a way, it has," Clara replied, dipping her fingers into the cool water. "Just like the land waited for us to treat it with respect. Maybe that's why it led us here, to remind us of what truly matters." They spent hours there, exploring every corner of the oasis and marveling at its secrets. When hunger finally drove them to return to the surface, they did so reluctantly, knowing they had stumbled upon something extraordinary. Back at the estate, news of their discovery spread quickly among the workers and townsfolk. Many expressed interest in seeing the hidden canyon for themselves, leading Clara and Elias to organize guided tours. These excursions became a source of joy and connection, bringing together people from all walks of life under the shared banner of wonder and appreciation for nature. Through these experiences, Clara came to understand that healing wasn't just about confronting the past or building a better future. It was also about finding moments of peace and beauty in the present. And with Elias by her side, she knew she could face whatever challenges lay ahead, secure in the knowledge that they were doing so together. As the seasons changed and the years passed, their story continued to unfold, weaving itself into the fabric of the Wild West. They faced trials and triumphs, laughter and tears, but always with unwavering determination and love. For Clara and Elias, the journey was far from over, but it was theirs to shape one step at a time.